was due. And recording in progress. And at the AOT, at day one yesterday, you saw we heard a lot about the Honorable Minister of Digital Economy and Communications talking about the startup bill that they hope to pass. I think as early as next week, and from there it goes to the House, right? These are interesting things. Mr. Olatunji Alake also talked about the progress being made with such a startup bill. So we're going to be highlighting what are the challenges risks that present investors from willingly stimulating the growth of Africa's tech ecosystem. And this is interesting as well because the SN innovation, Mr. Olatunji Alake, and even Mr. Kola Oyeni, on stage yesterday, actually facing the representative from the Securities and Exchange Commission, which is Reginald Arawusa, that look, we really need to stop government trying to, basically frustrate the tech ecosystem in this. Just one, we know that there's a brisk trade for regulators with regards trying to manage risk and trying not to facilitate innovation. But at the same time, we should be sure that we are not rewinding or deleting a lot of progress made. So these are things that we're going to be talking about. And I think if I have my fellow panelists with me, it would just be beautiful to start with the opportunities that investors should be looking out for in the growth and future that they and we will bring it back. And I also share my views on that. Thank you and welcome everyone again.
Okay, we thank you. We have our moderator now, Mr. Kayode. Please, you can take charge, sir.
Good morning.
Take charge, sir.
Sincere apologies. I mean, everything was fine. I think this if any time I had any doubt on how important tech was, I think today kind of solved it. Was already set to log in, and then power went out, switched to Gen, and everything that could go wrong with the internet went wrong. So it's one of those things, and more than ever now, I'm more passionate about seeing how we get tech to really help us accelerate the potential of Africa. It was interesting. Just this morning, I was reflecting a little bit on some of the old economist papers that I'd read over time. And I'm just going to quickly share with you what the evolution has been since 2000 till 2019. So if you look at the economist publication for 2000, the positioning that Africa had, and I'm just going to quote verbatim, was front page, the cover page, the hopeless continent, right? In 2011, Africa became the rising Africa. And then it became aspiring Africa. And in 2019, the Economist had a front page cover or a cover page for Africa saying the new spotlights. And the headline was the scramble for Africa. So I think it goes without saying that everybody sees what the opportunity is, right? And I think it becomes more and more pertinent that we understand how to better position so that investors see what needs to be done, right? Understand what the future is, and we're able to leverage the opportunities better. I think before we go into all of the conversations that I'm sure we are going to enjoy today, I'll just quickly introduce myself. My name is Kayode. I'm not a very, I'm not one of the most astute tech people, but I am a big consumer of tech. I've been worked in manufacturing for over 20 years. I've used tech from everything on, quality assurance to product manufacturing to actually business management and the tools for marketing today. And we know that without tech, our industry is nowhere and we will totally struggle. Having said that, before we start the discussions, I'm just going to do a quick round of introductions with our panelists. And I'm going to start with Mr. Eli David. Just a quick introduction before we start. Eli, over to you. Sorry, is Eli on the call? Then I'll just keep to Mr. Wole Odetayo.
Thank you very much, Kay. My name is Wole Odetayo. I'm the co-founder and managing partner of Lofting Allied Partners Limited, or Lofting Group. And Lofting is a group of companies that's focused on using innovation to tackle some of the toughest challenges in the world, particularly in Africa here. Part of those other companies that Lofting are subsidiaries of Lofting is Innovation Hub, Lofting Capital Management, and a handful of other companies too. At Innovation Hub too, also our mandate is to support and grow businesses that tackle some of these tough challenges. I'm passionate about innovation and using innovation to tackle some of these big socioeconomic challenges too. So it's a reflection of also who I am. And I'm excited to be here today and looking forward to a great conversation.
Thank you very much, Wale. Thank you so much. Mr. Okwe George?
Thank you very much, Kade. Good afternoon, everyone. So my name is Okwe George. I work as the Special Advisor to the Governor of Lagos State on public-private partnerships. Thank you very much. It's exciting to be much again.
Thank you, Mr. Okwe. Totally excited to hear that passion and enthusiasm from you. We do know that we always need government to help us create the enabling environment to help accelerate with what we do in the private sector. So thank you so much for joining. Mr. Salami Abolore.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Salami. I run a company called Ribi, Digital and Financial Services. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Salami. Mr. Olusheye Vasu. Mr. Olusheye, are you on the call? Okay, then I'll just skip to Mr. Tosi and Yolorunda. Mr. Shegun Cole.
Yeah, thank you. Go ahead. Who's that? Please go ahead. Okay. Hi, my name is Shegun Cole, co-founder from the Alliance. Basically, from the Alliance is a Pan-African network that addresses the issues of local founder representation and the allocation of venture capital. Thank you.
Yeah, Shegun, I don't know if you could just take that one more time. There's a lot of feedback in the background. We could barely hear you.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, perfect.
Yes, I'm a co-founder of the Alliance. Basically, we are a Pan-African network that addresses the issues of local founder on the representation and the allocation of venture capital. Thank you.
Thank you, Shegun. Thank you. So, no, just to give a bit of context before we dive in, right? I think one thing that is becoming clearer and clearer for all of us to see is that across Africa, investors are looking for the next big investment, right? And when we look at the successes of organizations like Paystack and Flutterwave, everybody's looking for that next big one. And I think with the growth across Africa's tech ecosystem and generally across Africa's economy, and the successes we've seen this year with funding, with lots of innovative ideas coming out and lots of startups, I think investors are now keen on potentials of these startups and how to take you into glorious exits. I think fintech especially has recorded huge wins in investment deals. And the critical impact within the financial sector over the last couple of years cannot be understated. I think what's interesting is, as we look at the proliferation and the changes in Web 3.0 and blockchain technologies, Africa particularly has seen boundless opportunities arise, right? And the diverse markets and capturing the huge consumer markets in Africa starts to show itself in true light. We're reflecting today just on the sheer size of Africa and realizing that the size of the continent in geographical landmass, right, would accommodate China, would accommodate Europe, would accommodate India, right? And then you start to ask, is Africa really small? No, it is not. It's a big, big opportunity. In my sector, in the consumer goods sector, we know that this is one of the new frontiers for growth. And this growth is definitely going to be powered from tech to help us accelerate. So we know that these new possibilities exist. And I think what's crucial is, in spite all of the positives we see, there are still setbacks, right? Just about half of Africa is actively involved in investment actions on this continent, yeah? With the other half experiencing little or no investments or investor activity over the last 3 years. So definitely something needs to shift and something needs to change very quickly for us to leverage as much as we can. Today, what will be interesting for us to discuss will be to identify areas of future development that offers prospects for investing, right? In a way that is sustainable and gives us the needle shift that we want. I think understanding ways through which Africa's investment can reap the most benefit and the highest ROI and achieve the best result for investors is another area that I'm sure our audience will be very interested in listening to. I am particularly keen on that. I think it would be great if we are able to pull out clear understanding of the peculiarities of the African market and the sectors that we can leverage to offer value through investment. So with that, I think I will delve in. We do not have some of our panelists on the call. So I will start today with Mr. Wole Odetayo, right? And I just wanted to, reflect a little bit on Lofty Inc., right? This year, you've participated in significant number of deals with interest around products that users usually need. And I think a balance of strong funding terms and execution tenacity has been seen in a lot of these transactions. I think when I look at your investments that have supported startups like Printivo, Reliance HMO, ePump, uVerify, Flutterwave across many rounds, the buzz of investment activity is a proof of the fact that the ecosystem in Africa is growing, right? What, in your opinion, are the factors hindering some of these sectors from relevantly capturing the investors' interest? What's slowing us down, and what can we do better to make such sectors become more attractive for funding?
Thank you very much. And I would just thank you very much for the question. Great question, and thanks for the introduction. Yeah, you see, when you look at the different sectors that we've that we've seen tremendous success in Nigeria, particularly, and maybe even in Africa, particularly in Nigeria here, we've seen Flutterwave, we've seen Paystack, we've seen Andela, for example. You would find out that there's this common thing around this set of guys that you won't find in other sectors, and that speaks to my first point around the issue with infrastructure. If I want to build that more, if I want to encompass that, I would even say it's more of a microeconomic barrier that we're facing. The reason why we've not seen this blossom in another sector, health, for example, is very crucial. When you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, health is very important, but we've not been able to scale that in health, is because of these macroeconomic, I like to call them caps. Our microeconomic barrier is like a bottle, and because that bottle is fixed, every bottle is fixed, something you can see, and when you fill that bottle to the brim, it won't take more than what that bottle can take. There are certain sectors, beyond these other sectors like financial services, that this macroeconomic cap is limiting us, in my own opinion. And because of that, until and I'm going to get to the solutions later, until we break that barrier and create a bigger bottle, better macroeconomic conditions, we might not be able to scale this. And one major part of this, for example, is logistics. So logistics hinders productivity, and productivity is a very key part of microeconomics, right? How much can we produce per time, in an economy? And where you have logistics, for example, you can't move goods around because they're bad goods. Where raw materials are meant to get to the factories is bad. Where the factories are meant to get to the rest of the market is bad. It's going to tremendously increase the cost. And of course, the force of demand and supply, once that comes into play, less people can't, more people can't afford, and just a few people can afford those products and services, be it tech services or not. So all these things have a direct impact on most of the other parts of where we've not seen that scaled in the last 10 years. And that in itself has brought us that low. The second very important point that I would like to also bring to bear here is availability of data. I remember when the ecosystem was getting up, so I'd love to, when Innovation Hub, for example, crossed 10 this year, and we're going to be 11 in about 2 months. And in that past 10, 11 years, when in those days when we used to have Mobile Monday gatherings, in 2001, 2002, what we used to discuss then were the data, big data released by NCC and big data released by NIBS at the time, right? And you can see that 10 years later, we're talking about, we're talking about unicorns in those sectors. Because when you understand how people are interacting with their mobile and how they are using money, in an electronic format, and when you understand, how much mobile subscribers you have, big data, when you have that data and people analyzing it, you're bound to have more innovation in that space. And that is what is lacking generally. Africa is like a black hole of data, maybe with a few exceptions in the MENA region and maybe in South Africa, but the rest of Africa is more like a black hole when it comes to data, big data. And that in itself is a major thing to look at. When you talk about, the solutions, my first solution for the macroeconomic would be that we need to invest in R&D. R&D is very crucial. If we don't, so for example, in Africa, we have about $400 billion in infrastructure deficit, and this is basic infrastructure deficit, right? That 400 billion, if we try to import, people to come and, be the engineers on our road project, we try to import, finished products to build that infrastructure, we're not going to get there fast. We're going to mortgage so many several people's future and money, and we're going to borrow too much and that we'll not be able to contain. So we're not going to build as fast as we. But if we invest in R&D, because Africa is rich, both beneath the ground and above the ground, that is, in terms of human resources and in terms of mineral resources. If we invest in Africa's research and development, we will be able to come up with our own local ways of turning these raw materials to finished product, and how we can then apply that. Also, research and development is like a bridge between the market and the academia. So the academia is deep head, neck down in research, looking for biggest, best solutions, looking for how to use bamboo to build houses, how to bring a duplex, cost of building duplex in Nigeria today to maybe 5 million naira. But then the market is not connected to them. So the market is there trying to sell cement. How can both come together and say, how can we build this new product that can build houses faster? And then people then start to have, cheaper houses, cheaper roads, and infrastructure are built very, very fast. That's the power of R&D. And of course, the second thing is to invest in data mining and analysis. I like the fact that yesterday, LASRIC, was emphasized, and what the governor, this present government dispensation is doing in that respect. I respect that and I love that, but we need to do more, right? Open data government is one. Data is one of the biggest custodians of data. Government is one of the biggest custodians of data anywhere in the world. But also we need to start the conversation in the private sector, where a lot of these analyses are being converted to real innovation and real consumption and efficient consumption. So again, data investment, and this is private sector investment in research, is one, and also private sector investment and also government support in opening up data, getting the regulators to gather data and to release that data anonymous. It took us almost 10 years of talking about, I remember 2001, 2011, and 2012, I used to talk about these NIBS, when NIBS released, ATM users, when NCC will release how many subscribers and all that, and see how far it's gotten us. So we need to invest in that, and I'll leave that for now for maybe others to talk about. Thank you.
No, a very powerful point, and you know, I was nodding and smiling, and I can totally resonate, right? As you know, an avid consumer of data, I definitely constantly need data, and my colleagues in my industry are constantly frustrated, right? And I think you hit the nail on the head. One thing we always use when we are conversing about Africa is that we are data dark, right? And as such, you'd find that there's a lot of inefficiencies in operation. So when you were talking supply chain challenges in ferrying goods and services and all of that, you know, not only do we have infrastructural deficit, but we have a lot of inefficiencies, right? Because we're not planning to purpose, right? We just don't have the data. And even where the data sits, we don't have the capacity for insights in, right? To be able to understand what should we do and convert that data into action. I think it's very interesting that you mentioned those two. And actually, you know, it's this data and the insights you get from it that triggers, you know, what you do with R&D, right? So all of these elements you mentioned are super interconnected. I think this is where we come back to Mr. Okwe, because, you know, at the end of the day, a lot of this, whilst the private sector needs and is happy to shoot forward for it, I think understanding how the government would help give us that data access and help create the enabling environment becomes more and more crucial. And knowing the interest in public-private partnerships, I think, let's go to Mr. Okwe just to get a few thoughts from him on some of your points, Wally.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Candy. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So thank you, and thank you also, Wally, for your points. You know, I think you know, for us, you know, with I spoke about earlier, with collaboration with the private sector, you know, just the fact that we're all sitting here and having this discussion is testimony, in fact, that, you know, that we're all going in the right direction in terms of being able to sort of match what is required from the private sector with what the public sector can give. You know. I think for me, I'm not a tech expert, so I'm just more on the policy and more on how things work with government and what we can do to support, you know. So if I was to sort of add on to some things I heard Wale say, was that, you know, if, for instance, going into specifics, if I said, you know, what to my mind, what were the top 5 reasons why, you know, maybe startups would fail, you know, I'd say maybe I'd put in there running out of cash and, you know, failure to raise capital, you know, the market needs, you know, getting out competed, maybe flawed business models, and then also maybe regulatory and legal challenges. So, you know, for me, from a state's perspective, you know, what I like to talk on 2 of the points. So if we look at the fact that, you know, running out of cash, and, you know, what we've done in the States is that, you know, we've looked at the issue of being very supportive and, you know, putting into place policy instruments such as ensuring that we can provide grants and loans to startups that help them keeping their ecosystem vibrant, you know. So apart from that, the regulatory and legal framework is very important. You know, we know that private capital likes to be protected. So we know that we have an enabling environment, you know, for PPPs where within the state, I mean, Lagos State was one of the first states to have a PPP office in 2008. We have an enabling law which was enacted in 2011. You know, so for us, you know, being able to ensure that private capital is guided and private capital is secure is very key. You know, in terms of data and you know, the comments of Africa and, you know, being data dark, and, you know, I think first of all, you know, one of the key things is that we need to, as a country and as a state, we need to know ourselves. We need to know, you know, how many we are, where we are, demographics, you know, and you know, and that's all the data, you know, part of what we say in terms of data, knowing ourselves, you know. So as a state, you know, and one of the challenges we have is that, you know, Lagos State is a subnational, you know, and, you know, a lot of what we do, we take on a lot of things that, you know, obviously would be in other climes would be nationals that would take it up and take it up over, you know. But that in itself is not one for, you know, I know I've seen figures that say that Lagos and indeed 5 other African cities account for over 90% of Africa's estimated, I think it's about 6.6 billion worth of startup investments that come into the continent. So we are on the forefront, and we need to ensure that we have the enabling environment that can sort of guide and make that investment secure. So if we go back to what we do or what we're trying to do as a state, you know, we've realized that, first of all, I touched quickly on knowing ourselves. So, you know, at LASHRA, we have a resident registration, where we're trying to sort of know all residents of Lagos register. We know ourselves, we know how many we are, we know where we are, we have the demographics, and that is also linked to various other things. So, we also have a situation now where we're currently gridding the whole of the state, most of the parts of the state with fiber. I think we're close to about 3,000 kilometers of fiber now, of cables we've put around the states, and we feel that with all this would all help in terms of being able to sort of push up and help the ecosystem we have in within the state in tech. So I mean, we're looking for collaborations in private sector data centers. We're putting together public sector fiber. So that public sector smart infrastructure we're putting in place. And so I think for us, we know that it's not we're not there yet. I wouldn't sit here and say we've done everything, we're not there. But I think as a state, we're doing our best to ensure that we can sort of create the enabling environment. Now, don't get me wrong. I know the challenges are there, and a lot of challenges that hinder, startups. But if you think about it, these challenges are not specific to, say, the states, So, I mean, it's specific to the environment we live in. So, I mean, an issue like poor electricity is a huge issue. Wale talked about the fact that these things drive up the cost in terms of being able to sort of, apart from electricity, being able to sort of transport your goods, and just the basic infrastructure around the state, around the country. But I think we're a resilient bunch, and I think in terms of the way tech goes and innovation, I think a lot of this our startups and a lot of the innovation we're seeing is coming to help sort of help us get solutions to the peculiar problems we have within our environment. So I think for me, I'll sort of stop there, and if there are any more questions as to how we could sort of give a bit more information, I'd be happy to sort of chip in.
That was really brilliant. And I think, credit to Lagos State. I think quite a lot of work has been done over the last, I'd say 4 or 5 years on accelerating what we do to enable the environment. And I think a huge acceleration in the last 2 we have seen. I think, one of the things that, constantly crosses my mind is that we are playing catch up, right? And it's okay to say Lagos is a subnational. I mean, that is the fact, but the perception is totally different, right? In a state where many organizations get higher turnover from one state in Nigeria than they get from some countries across West Africa, or maybe even a cluster of countries. The interest in the private sector, or the view of the private sector, is that Lagos needs to accelerate, right? You're talking about a city of over 20 million people. I think, considering the fact that we're playing catch up and understanding the space that you operate in, which is public-private partnership, I think one follow-on question I just wanted to throw out there is, is there room for the private sector to work with you in accelerating some of these initiatives that gets us to a state of readiness faster, right? And if there's room for that, how are we projecting that to the necessary partners to help speed up the process?
Thank you, Kari. I think you're correct. There is, I'll sort of tackle that in twofold. I think for us in Lagos, we have all these statistics that say the amount of people that are coming to Lagos and all whatnot. But I think one of the things I like to say is that we don't always have to. And I think you touched on the fact that yes, we're subnational, but I think we're also hindered by our success, so to speak, if I can use that, in the sense that, you get judged by, you hear, Lagos gets judged by Ghana, by Rwanda, by Kenya, which are our countries. But that's all fine. But I think for me, one of the things I look at is that we have to do better in terms of ensuring that our surrounding environment is good. So everyone doesn't have to live in Lagos, So if as a region, and if I go to say Ogun State and other states, we can ensure that, there's a lot who live in Ogun and work in Lagos, So we can ensure that this development is farmed out everywhere else. There's a lot more. That way, people are not having to sort of all come and live in, because we can't build ourselves. I mean, you touched on some figures, our infrastructure deficit. We can't build enough roads to build ourselves out of traffic. We just wouldn't happen if we're being sincere and honest with ourselves. So we need to ensure that development is spread out. And for us, one of the things is that when you're discussing with private sector, private sector is usually skeptical about coming to work with government, But I think what you find is that once you, and quite rightly, once you walk into an environment where, you see that your investments can be secure, and the proper policies in place that help guide your investments and give you the comfort, then that's a lot of the work that has been done in terms of the comfort. So in terms of being able to sort of get investments in and get collaborations with the private sector, we're open, we're keen, we're happy to sort of sit down. And I think once you walk in and you feel you see you're dealing with one, a responsive government, and two, you're sitting across the table and talking to people who know what they're talking about and who have the interest, and you know that your agreement, the sanctity of agreement. So tomorrow something changes, it doesn't just go out the door. It's a case of, you have a proper agreement that is binding, then I think it gives a lot of comfort. And, we only, you can only get this by doing a lot more, the track, people getting comfortable and knowing that, okay, fine, once you go and sit down and contract with a government, and you're contracting with Lagos State government, you're contracting with a reasonable and trustworthy government. And to sort of quickly go back and touch back on the, this, I keep saying I'm not a techie person, but, this conference is very exciting because I find that, just the fact that you're being able to sort of support startups, you're being able to sort of give these grants and, because that's what they need. You need to be able to support them. And, once they see that they have that support from the states, the other big issues of the infrastructure challenges and deficits and things, we'll continue working on that, but we need to ensure that at least whilst that is working, we need to support and make sure these businesses keep going, keep running, because, it has also some knock-on effects in economy and employment, just general, even if you look at the SDGs, just be able to sort of say quality of life, they're all important, we can't always sort of sit down and sort of mark things in terms of indices, the GDP and all whatnot. But the truth is that we need to drill down to the basics and look at, how we can help our people live better.
No, thank you so much for that. And it was interesting. I mean, you also mentioned one of the challenges that a lot of startups goes through, which is basically burning out cash, at the time when they should be investing strongly for infrastructural development and even reinvesting to be able to scale up. And Shego, that brings me to you. I was just thinking, and you more than most people will probably understand that filling this funding gap and the disparity of funding across startups is really sizable, right? Some people come and they're able to get access to fund and so, sustainable funding, some just can't, right? And it's a struggle. I think, what do you think at the... Sorry, Shego, we have a feedback, so maybe you mute one. So I was just saying, what do you think are the key funding disparities in the tech ecosystem?
Okay, yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, so that's the first one. I think I've got three questions for you, right? So what is, basically I really want to understand this funding disparities. What are they? Why do we have them? How do you feel we can solve that today, right? I really need your advice on this. I think third one is, what are ways through which investors can become actively involved with the growth of the tech ecosystem? Apart from funding, right? Funding is just one. Wale was talking about Peter earlier, insights and R&D. What are these things that investors can become actively involved in or help us accelerate the tech ecosystem?
Okay, thank you. I think Mr. Okwe, special advisor, has mentioned that. Sorry, just to recognize the Honorable Commissioner for Science and Technology is with us here as well. So we've talked about concentration of funding, for example, in fintech, right? You also have concentration of funding in just like 4 key ecosystems. Then when you drill down, you also have concentration of funding in male-led startups. We've seen from yesterday, the Honorable Commissioner on Digital Economy, Alhaji Ali Pantami, talked about data from the big deal database. All the funding that was celebrating in the African ecosystem 2021. Some will say $4 billion. Yesterday, I had $6 billion. I was shocked, right? It will surprise you that 94% of that has gone to male founders, right? That's nothing to celebrate. So we're having this concentrations of funding. Then you also have concentration of funding in ticket sizes. And ticket sizes like the average ticket size. Some will say $1 million, some will say $1.5 million. But when you now take it to the context of Latin America, or the context of the likes of India, maybe $4.5 billion, $5.8 billion respectively, and that's quite small. And the ticket sizes that we actually need to see, where we need to see funding going into, is at the early stage, the pre-seed and the seed. But yeah, quite some amount of funding has gone into that, but we need more, right? As much as we're chasing for unicorns, and what investors are doubling down in the investments in the likes of Paystack and Flutterwaves, if we do not see a lot of funding also going into the pre-seed and the seed stage startups, then those startups will never thrive. They will not scale. They will not create jobs, right? They will not help the economy. They will not be able to attract more value. So these are a lot of challenges that you're seeing, not just in Nigeria. You're seeing, and for us at Fund the Gap Alliance, right, Pan-African network. So we're dealing with these startup challenges, trying to address them across the African ecosystem. For example, you have, take for Egypt, the Egyptian startup ecosystem currently suffers from like the lack of dedicated incubators and accelerator programs that help early stage startups scale their businesses. And that sounds familiar. And for, let's say, the Egyptian startup ecosystem, it would benefit from more creative public sector methods, which Mr. Okwe talked about, and to attract these funding opportunities for startups. And also the big elephant in the room, which not many of us are talking about, which is an improved regulatory environment, right? And a greater entrepreneurial mindset. Even this year, you saw a lot of startups basically go out of business, right? And I was very happy when Mr. Kola was talking to the SEC representatives, right? Because you're having, in fact, as a startup, it's getting to a time where you have to actually have a department that is looking at the news just to know whether you are still in business the next morning, right? Because you could just wake up one morning and you just see this has been banned, right? And what happens to investors' money? So investors look at these things, right? And having this enabling environment is very, very key. You have other ecosystems like Ghana, which was seen coming out of under the radar. You have for Ghana, what you see is that you have this challenges, which are lack of infrastructure and investment options that limit resources for startups. That also sounds familiar. So we need to also see how we could stimulate ecosystems like ours and encourage the rise of other startup hubs in our cities to create opportunities. So these are just quite a few challenges that we're seeing and we need to address. Now, I think the second question was about what investors can do aside funding. In earlier presentations, I'm trying to know which one exactly. We talked about local investors. It's so sad that a huge value that is being created today is not created by local investors. It's basically foreign. So when you see majority of all these races, this raises this raise this, a lot of those fundings are not local. It's basically on the internet. You see them and you look at the investors that participated in this round. Yeah, very good. We have the likes of Lofty Inc., right? Doing tremendous work. You have the likes of syndicate funds like Future Africa doing a lot of work. We have venture fund, right? But in terms of ticket sizes, compared to the foreign investment, they are still low. So at the Funding Gap Alliance as well, other things we're also looking at is how to support African fund managers. Because even African fund managers are even having issues getting enough investment to support early stage startups, right? You can see them getting $10 million, their funds, maybe $15 million. But when you still have foreign investors doing $900 million, So they can't match that. So you even have challenges of fund managers trying to, have enough capital to be able to provide follow-on funding for startups. We have local incubators in Nigeria. We have in Lagos State. But every day, incubators are shutting down. These are the facts. Hubs are shutting down because even hubs cannot even, they are struggling to operate. In some areas, you even have hubs competing with startups. There are startups in their own hubs for funding. So these are issues that are facing us. And for the question of what investors can do aside funding, speaking back to local investors, it's time where local investors really need to tap in, or they lose out in that value. But what we also see, like Lofty Inc., you have active local investors, local fund managers. You also have active local HNIs. I think this is the time where they need to start doing what we call local investment evangelism, right? To the other ones that are still dragging feet on this, right? Every day you have investors, not sophisticated local angels, but at least with people that have some money to throw around. They're in WhatsApp groups asking, how can we fund the next phase? Refer me to this, right? We need to start doing a lot of evangelism to this guy and saying, look, you have to support. But just like Mr. Peter Bankole has said earlier on, TD also said, it's about value as well, right? So we need a lot of active evangelism on sides of local investors to the other ones that are still dragging their feet. Then we also need just local investors to also get involved in the areas of mentoring, providing business resources, right? Taking active part in. If, for example, look at Startup Lagos, we need a lot of engagement on how to bring these local investors and this local investment community, joining hands with the likes of Startup Lagos Eco Innovation Center, right? EDC, right? And so, how can we move this forward? Because at the end of the day, no matter what we say, foreign investors are always going to come. And foreign investors are always only going to put their money where they feel that they're going to get high valuation, right? So if the local investor community don't stand up right now, you just continue seeing these foreign investors coming in, and once the value is created, that money is going back. So as much as we're celebrating that these are led by Nigerian founders, at the end of the day, by the time they get Series B or Series C, they are not Nigerian companies anymore. This is what nobody wants to talk about. But these are things that we advocate for at Gap Alliance. And last I want to touch on, but I could answer the question, is that what I've seen over time is there's a lot of isolation. You have different agencies, different bodies, different governments, doing things that they can actually complement, not just even in the public sector independently or the private sector, but even across board. And one of the things that we advocate for as well is, look, we have to collaborate if we are going to attract the kinds of funding we want to attract. And not just even in funding, we're looking at how do we even get our local startups to list on the likes of Nigerian Stock Exchange. I'm sure if the founder of Paystack was here now, or the founder of Flutterwave was here now, and you tell them that come and list on the Nigerian Stock Exchange, they will just look at you funny. But you will have the startups gladly go to the London Stock Exchange and go and list there, right? These are things that we need to also see. How do we get, then in the areas of, I think Mr. Peter Bankole talked about corporate governance, right? How many startups even look into things like that? So at the end of the day, when you now have this crisis, there's no governance in place, and they fold. And a huge reason why startups are even crashing has nothing to do with capital. Sometimes that has a lot to do with corporate governance and things like what Mr. T talked about, things like even co-founders synergies. So to avoid stories that such, in a nutshell, we need to also collaborate, and of course we need to have that enabling environment, a favorable investment climate. Thank you.
Olusegun, thank you so much. And I think a lot of the points you made, I think, are super powerful. One of the things that I've always wondered. I don't know if you could just mute for a second. So, Sheikh, one of the things that I think I've always found very interesting, especially when you talk about, local investors not being active in the Nigerian tech ecosystem, is it possible that, maybe there is a general lack of understanding of how this ecosystem works and how viable those investments might be over time, right? Could that be one of the reasons? And I think you touched on this local investment evangelism, right? And I think it's a really big thing that in the laundry list of requests, and it's really great that we have the people that we can share this laundry list with. I think is one of the things we take down for the future. And it's interesting you mentioned, the conversation around corporate governance. And I think that's also another really big one. In the interest of time, I'm going to take this down and we're going to bring it back as some of the laundry list of requests. But just before we go, I think just two things I wanted to touch on, and it's with Mr. Salami. If you could just, very quickly, just help me with one thing. One thing that I think I'm super curious about, and I'm sure a lot of people are asking questions on, is when we talk about tech investments in Nigeria. So far, it seems that the biggest beneficiary where we are getting huge traction is in fintech, right? But there's a lot of opportunity in education technology, health technology as well. What's holding that back, and what's the potential for growth in all of these other tech sectors for Africa over the next maybe 10 years? What are your takes on that? Salami, you're on mute.
Huge apologies. Can you take that just 30 seconds to tap?
No, sorry. I was just saying, if we look at the tech ecosystem in Nigeria today, right, we get a lot of traction in fintech, right? However, other opportunity areas like edutech, health tech, even tech to support startup, organizations, small enterprises is not really getting that much traction, right? Is there an opportunity for those other subsectors over the next 10 years to accelerate? What's your take on the opportunities in Africa?
Thank you, and I'm happy that we are being very frank. Sorry that I can try to be on video, but I'm on the move. It's a what do you call that weekend? One of those Owambe weekends. But I'm really excited about the conversation we're having because I just kept mute all throughout the conversation. I'm like, okay, the hiccup at the beginning, and then Sensei felt like we're saying the same thing over and over and over, and I'm like, okay, I'll just listen to the end. But I'm very happy that someone mentioned about, number one, how we are not seeing the full value of what is really going on. Are we creating African companies, or are we creating pseudo Silicon Valley companies, right? And I saw a notice that this breakout session is going to end in 40 seconds or something. So can you continue?
I think try and finish that point, and then we're going to the main room.
I think the real thing is just, I hope that we'll truly understand that we need to create African companies, and it has to be multi-sectoral. People are following the money right now, which is why you see fintech. So I leave the rest to you, and thanks for the very frank conversations.
Thank you, Salami. So we joined the main room back, and then we take some of these points and questions from the audience there.